1510 AD, the marshlands of Poland. Peasants stood knee-deep in mire, staring at land too wet to plough. Crops rotted before harvest. Animals sank into the mud. For generations, these wetlands had been worthless. Starvation ground. Then an elder remembered something from the Codex Copernicus. An old technique. Forbidden knowledge passed down in whispers. Cut logs, lay them upon the mire as if building a road, pile mud and peat upon the logs, 1 or 2 spades deep. The logs keep feet dry and help soil drain freely. They called it hugel, the mound. Within months, the mire bloomed. Root crops, beets, onions, radishes, and turnips erupted from soil that had never grown food. There were up to 6 harvests a year where nothing had grown before. The technique spread across medieval Europe, Germany, Eastern Europe, the Alps, wherever waterlogged ground met desperate farmers. But in 1920, something changed. Tractors rolled onto fields, and agriculture made a choice. Flat ground, straight rows, maximum speed. The mounds were leveled. The logs were burned. And a 1,000-year-old technique that could water itself for 2 decades disappeared in a single generation. This is the story of Hugelkultur, the self-watering garden that survived medieval marshes and alpine winters, and the mechanized agriculture industry that buried it. The word comes from German. Hugel means mound. Kultur means culture. But the technique is far older than the name. In 1510, the Codex Copernicus documented it explicitly. It said that where land is too wet to be ploughed, crops may still be grown. Cut logs and lay these upon the mire, as in building a road. Hugel can be any length, but it is convenient to measure them narrowly so that plants may be tended from both sides. Pile mud and peat upon the logs, 1 or 2 spades deep. The logs keep feet dry and help soil drain freely. The instructions continued. Dress gardens in autumn or after every crop. Cover the earth with rushes and weeds, or gather leaves from the forest. These rot and make vegetable manure as good as cow dung. Hugel are best used to grow root crops like beet, onion, radish, and turnip, because these plants grow well in shallow soils. Up to 6 crops can be gathered if weather is favorable. It was precise. It was effective. And for centuries, European peasants used it to farm impossible land. Then, in 1962, a farmer in the Austrian Alps took the technique to its extreme. Sepp Holzer inherited his parents' mountain farm, the Krametterhof, in the Lungau region of Austria. Elevation was 1,100 to 1,500 meters above sea level. The average annual temperature was 4 degrees Celsius. Winters reached -25 degrees Celsius. There were 170 frost days per year. It was nicknamed Austria's Siberia. When Holzer took over in 1962, he tried conventional farming methods. They failed completely. The altitude was too high, the winters too cold, and the growing season too short. So he went back to what his childhood had taught him, the book of nature. He began burying logs, not just in marshes, but on steep alpine slopes, under terraces, and beneath every garden bed. He stacked oak and maple logs 3 feet high, packed them with branches and leaves, covered them with soil, and planted. Within 2 years, something impossible happened. Lemons grew in the snow, kiwis ripened at 1,500 meters, grapes hung heavy on vines where neighbors could not even grow grass, citrus trees bent under fruit while surrounded by spruce forests. Austrian agricultural authorities arrived with clipboards. They measured his terraces, they inspected his ponds, they examined his mounds of buried wood, and they fined him, again and again. and again. By the late 1980s, Sepp Holzer had been fined more times than any farmer in Austrian history. The Agricultural Board threatened to seize his farm. They accused him of creating illegal water retention structures, of violating forestry regulations, of reckless land management. The Austrian biologist Bernd Loch called him the agricultural rebel, not as criticism, as recognition, because Holzer's yields were undeniable. While neighbors produced monoculture spruce on depleted soil, Holzer harvested 45 hectares of forest gardens, 70 ponds, thousands of fruit trees, vegetables, grains, mushrooms, and livestock, all without fertilizer, without irrigation, without pesticides. His farm produced 10 times more food per acre than any conventional farm at that altitude. By 1992, after yet another fine for expanding a pond, the evidence could no longer be ignored. Government inspectors came to document his failures. Instead, they photographed his success. Citrus trees in alpine snow, 8-year harvests from logs buried once, soil that stayed moist through drought while neighbors' wells ran dry. The fines never stopped him. They only made him more certain. Nature, left to its own wisdom, can outlast any bureaucracy. Holzer understood something modern agriculture had forgotten. Rotting wood is a sponge. In 2020, researchers at the Czarna Forest Reserve in Poland conducted water retention studies on decomposing wood. They tested 5 species, fir, aspen, oak, maple, and pine, across 5 stages of decay. The results were unambiguous. Heavily decomposed fir wood, the most degraded samples, absorbed water equal to 500% of their dry weight. Fresh wood doubled its mass. Fully decomposed wood quintupled it. The science explained what medieval peasants had observed. Wood's cellular structure, the lignin and cellulose, forms microscopic tunnels. As fungi and bacteria decompose the cell walls, these pathways widen. Water floods in. A study published in Geoderma in 1996 by Mando and colleagues measured water infiltration in Burkina Faso's Sahel region. They were not studying hugel culture. They were studying termites in wood. They found that decomposing wood increased water infiltration rates by 100 to 300% compared to surrounding soil. The termite tunnels created by consuming buried organic matter became channels for water flow. The same mechanism powers hugel culture. You bury the log. Microbes and fungi colonize it. They eat the wood. They create tunnels. Rain and snowmelt flood those channels. The wood swells like a charged battery. Then, during drought, plant roots tap into this hidden reservoir. Field measurements from practitioners across North America and Europe confirm it. Moisture probes driven into 3-year-old hugel culture beds in July during peak drought register 40 to 60% soil moisture, even when the surface soil cracks from heat. The topsoil is dust. 6 inches down, where the buried logs sit swollen with water, the soil is damp. A gardener in the Pacific Northwest documented this precisely. She built a hugel culture bed in 2019. For the first year, she watered it weekly during summer. In year 2, she stopped watering. The plants thrived anyway. She measured soil moisture throughout the summer. Even after 6 weeks without rain, the buried logs maintained 35 to 45% moisture content. She put her hose away. She has not used it since. This isn't just water storage. It's a biological heat engine. When microbes and fungi decompose wood, they release energy. That energy becomes heat. A decomposing log generates warmth. In Holzer's alpine gardens, this effect is measurable. Even in winter, the soil above buried logs registers several degrees warmer than surrounding ground. Seeds germinate earlier in spring. Frost passes harmlessly over mounds buffered by internal warmth. The growing season extends weeks beyond what the altitude should allow. This is how he grew lemons in the snow. He wasn't just farming the soil, he was farming the heat of decomposition. And the fertility is relentless. Hardwood logs, oak, maple, beech, take 20 years to fully decompose. During that time, they release nitrogen, phosphorus, calcium, potassium at a pace that matches plant growth. There is no flush and crash, no boom and bust, just steady, reliable nutrition for 2 decades. The nitrogen dynamics are particularly elegant. Fresh wood is carbon-rich but nitrogen-poor. When you first bury a log, soil microbes need nitrogen to decompose it. If you do not add nitrogen-rich materials, manure, grass clippings, compost, the microbes will steal nitrogen from your plants. Your crops turn yellow. Growth stunts. This is called the nitrogen trap, and it is the most common hugel culture mistake. But if you layer nitrogen-rich material with the wood, the system self-regulates. The microbes get what they need, the plants get what they need, and within 2 to 3 years, the decomposing wood itself becomes a nitrogen pump. A 1993 study by Harvey and colleagues documented this in Pacific Northwest forests. Decomposing logs on the forest floor were not just releasing nitrogen, they were concentrating it. Free-living nitrogen-fixing bacteria colonized the rotting wood, pulling atmospheric nitrogen into the log and storing it there. The log became a nitrogen battery. Hugel culture beds work the same way. By year 3 or 4, the buried wood is actively fixing nitrogen from the air and feeding it to your plants. For free. For 20 years. So here is the question. If this technique waters itself, fertilizes itself, and extends the growing season, why did it disappear? Because in 1920, agriculture mechanized. By 1915, 61 companies in the United States were manufacturing tractors. Production exploded. In 1920, there were 186 tractor manufacturers. By 1930, tractors had replaced 24 million draft animals. The tractor required flat ground. Mounds slowed it down. Uneven terrain jammed plows. Buried logs were obstacles. The entire logic of mechanization demanded uniformity. Straight rows, level fields, maximum speed. Farmers who had built hugel culture mounds for generations faced a choice. Keep the mounds and farm slowly, or level the ground and buy a tractor. Economics made the decision. In the 1890s, producing 100 bushels of wheat required 40 to 50 labor hours. By 1930, with a tractor, it took 15 to 20 hours. The speed advantage was insurmountable, but speed required sacrifice. Flat fields meant no water retention structures, no buried logs, no self-watering systems. Instead, farmers needed irrigation, and when soil fertility depleted because the logs that had fed it were gone, they needed fertilizer. This shift created the industries we see today. The global fertilizer market is now worth $207 billion. The irrigation equipment industry is $65 billion. Hugel culture requires neither. A $10 log buried in a trench produces vegetables for 20 years. One log costs $10 to prepare. Over its lifetime, it yields 5 to 10 pounds of produce per year. That is 100 to 200 pounds total. At retail prices of $3 to $5 per pound for organic vegetables, that is $300 to $1,000 of food from a $10 investment. And it requires zero irrigation infrastructure, zero fertilizer inputs, zero annual costs. That is not a product. That is a threat to $272 billion of annual revenue. You cannot patent a buried log. You cannot sell annual subscriptions to decomposition. You cannot make farmers dependent on your products when their garden waters and fertilizes itself for 20 years. So the technique was marginalized, not banned, not made illegal, just quietly forgotten. Agricultural extension offices stopped teaching it. University programs focused on mechanized systems. Government subsidies flowed to tractor purchases and irrigation infrastructure. And within a single generation, a 1,000-year-old technique disappeared from mainstream agriculture. But the logs do not care about market share. You can build a hugel culture bed today. The construction is simple. Mark out an area 6 feet by 3 feet. Dig a trench 2 feet deep. Some builders skip the trench entirely and just mound above ground. Both work. The trench matters when you want stability. Gather logs. Hardwoods are best: oak, maple, beech, birch. Choose logs 3 to 8 inches in diameter. Already rotting is better than fresh. The more decomposed, the faster the system activates. Use hardwoods when possible. Never use cedar, walnut, or treated lumber. These release compounds toxic to other plants. They are allelopathic, and they will poison the bed. Never use these woods. Stack the logs in the trench. Fill gaps with branches, twigs, and small wood. Pack it tight. Air pockets will become sinkholes later. Pack the wood firmly. Now comes the critical step. The nitrogen trap. Fresh wood is carbon-rich. To decompose it, microbes need nitrogen. If you do not add nitrogen, microbes will take it from your soil and your plants will starve. Cover the wood with 4 to 6 inches of nitrogen-rich material. Fresh grass clippings, composted manure, kitchen scraps, even urine works, diluted 10 to 1 with water. Use nitrogen-rich amendments. This step is not optional. Without nitrogen, the decomposing wood will steal it from your plants. Your first-year crops will fail. Not optional. With nitrogen, the system ignites. Cover the nitrogen layer with 12 to 18 inches of topsoil. Then mulch heavily. Straw, leaves, wood chips. Water thoroughly for the first year while the logs saturate. Mulch well and water. Then you wait. For 12 to 18 months, the logs absorb water. Fungi colonize. Bacteria tunnel. The wood swells. The system charges. The system charges and holds moisture. Then it fruits. By the second year, the bed is self-watering. By the third year, it is self-fertilizing. By the 5th year, it reaches peak productivity. And it continues for 20 years. Self-watering and self-fertilizing. Some growers report 30-year beds still producing. 30-year beds can persist. The economics are stunning. A $100 investment in logs, manure, and soil produces 2 decades of vegetables. No annual fertilizer costs, no irrigation systems, no water bills. Economics favor hugel culture. Compare that to industrial agriculture. Industrial systems require ongoing inputs. Flat fields require irrigation infrastructure, pumps, pipes, sprinklers, and drip lines. The global irrigation market is $65 billion annually. Fertilizer inputs are $207 billion per year. Hugel culture requires neither. Ever. Hugel culture requires neither. And remember the heat. In alpine regions, hugel culture extends the growing season by weeks. In temperate climates, it enables winter gardening. The decomposition heat keeps soil temperatures 5 to 10 degrees warmer than surrounding ground. That heat extends the season. That is the difference between frost-killed crops and a harvest in November. Holzer proved this at 1,500 meters in the Austrian Alps. If it works there, it works anywhere. Holzer demonstrated it. Walk into any garden center today. Garden centers sell short-term fixes. The shelves are stacked with products. Bagged fertilizer, irrigation timers, soil amendments, moisture sensors. Every item designed to be purchased repeatedly, and every product creating annual revenue. These products build recurring sales. Hugelkultur eliminates the need for all of it. It eliminates repeat purchases. Bury one log today. In 18 months, it becomes a reservoir. For 20 years, it waters and feeds your garden. Without permission, without purchase orders, without annual subscriptions. A single log becomes a reservoir. Medieval peasants knew this. They farmed marshes using logs laid across mire. They fed villages from wetlands that conventional farming could not touch. Medieval farmers used this technique. Sepp Holzer knew this. He grew Mediterranean crops in alpine snow using nothing but buried wood and observation. Sepp Holzer practiced it. The technique survived 1,000 years. Then mechanization demanded flat fields, and within decades, Hugelkultur became experimental permaculture, something weird people do in backyard gardens. It lasted 1,000 years before being sidelined. But the science is clear. The water retention data is measured. The fertility timeline is documented. The 20-year lifespan is proven. They called it hugel, the mound. Now you know why they tried to bury it. Subscribe to Nature's Lost Vault. The next vault opens soon.